Hi there, my name is Jennifer Reid, and thank you for joining me to talk about Recruitment 2.0 and how we can use modern recruitment approaches and research approaches to increase diversity in research. As I said, my name is Jennifer. I'm the CEO and Chief Methodologist of the Rival Group, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today. I really think that what's at the heart of bringing more diversity into research is this ability to use the kind of conversation patterns that we use in our everyday life. And that is sort of a combination of being conversational. It's a combination of being mobile first and on the right kinds of devices. And when we mix these two things together, we've really found at Rival over the last 4 or 5 years that we have been able to recruit really dynamic, interesting, diverse groups of people for our, on behalf of the brands that we work with. I thought maybe before I jumped into the sort of how-tos and some of the points, I would actually sort of show you some stats that look across some of the communities that we've built. So these are demos that we've pulled across multiple communities, more than a dozen of them, to really get a feeling for what does our diversity look like when we're sort of cutting across, not just looking at one client over another. And I decided to pull it on sort of these 3 measures. Certainly ethnicity is one place when we talk about diversity that we're focused on. And we're really proud at Rival that we've been able to recruit ethnically diverse communities. These are communities that are in the United States specifically, where we really are able to reach into groups that have traditionally, I think, really sort of struggled with the research experience, that there's some trust issues that are going on with sort of traditional research, and that the sort of mobile first conversational approach that we take really feels a lot more it feels a lot more comfortable. And so we're able, without even having to work super hard at specific recruiting of ethnically diverse groups, that we're just finding that that's happening for us, for the most part, quite naturally. If we also look at age, I think age is another place where we don't have diversity. I would say the number one thing in every call that I take with a client, with a prospective client, what I hear over and over again is we're really having a hard time reaching young people, reaching Gen Zs or millennials as we're going through. These stats are a little skewed because, of course, I have a good number of communities that are really focused only on Gen Zs and millennials. But this, again, is an approach that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to unpack sort of why that is in a minute. And then if we look at gender and the distribution of gender, again, traditionally, we see that women are much more likely to do research than men. We've introduced this sort of notion over the last 5 years. It's been pretty much a constant at Rival since we began, of making sure that we have sort of gender inclusive questions. I have had the joy of working with a friend of mine who actually has a PhD in gender studies, as a tenured prof at a university in the UK. And he and I together worked on coming up with a question that we felt comfortable with, that is prefer to self-describe. So that's what we've been using. And having sort of this distribution, even from a gender perspective, that feels really a lot closer to what the world really looks like. So what are the principles, in my opinion, on how we add diversity to recruitment? The first is using inclusive tech. I've kind of hinted at that, but we're going to unpack that a little bit more. The second is being mindful of what you ask and how you ask it. And the third one is going where people are, doing recruitment in places where people natively are experiencing you and your brand. So let's start with using inclusive tech. Mobile is the great leveler. It is the device that we all have in our pocket. I think I've heard it referred to as sort of the adult soother. And really, regardless of what generation you're in, your income, what part of the world you live in, we really see that mobile is the piece of tech that we are most likely to have, certainly much bigger and greater than traditional desktop computers. And so at Rival, we really are all in the mobile space. Everything that we build, everything that we design is designed for mobile first. It certainly works on desktops, but it is really designed to work on the mobile device. There are a ton of things that we get with our mobile devices. We get access to the camera and all of the really awesome things that we can do with those cameras in order to make giving feedback feel more natural, feel more comfortable. And I'm going to show you a bunch of different examples of videos as we go through this study. Another piece that is equally important, I think, when we're talking about diversity is there's a study that was done by Wharton that really talks about the fact that on our mobile devices is the place that we are the most comfortable talking about sensitive issues. And, diversity and sensitive issues don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. But I think that notion that this is a device that we trust, that we feel connected to, that's important to us, really does allow us to kind of cut through and make research not feel like it's a test or that we're, kind of have our white lab coats on and we're being studied. This idea that we are actually making genuine connections between brands and their consumers means that we actually can get to insight as opposed to just analytics or studying. And what we found is that in doing so, we naturally get more diversity. Okay, I want to start with an example that is sort of an extreme example of how we might, how we can really use tech to reach into groups who are sort of underserved from the research experience. And then I'll sort of work it back to a more commercial example. And in this first example, we're talking about a study that we did in Rwanda on behalf of a Canadian not-for-profit that was really talking about sexual health awareness among young women who weren't necessarily living in urban centers, but in more rural areas. And it was because we did it in this sort of mobile fashion that we were able to sort of get into these villages and have these kinds of conversations, which would have otherwise been very difficult to have. This particular study was actually run through Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger is actually the internet provider in many parts of Rwanda. And so no matter who you are, you have Facebook and use Facebook Messenger. And so we were using a kind of tech that everybody was already familiar with, that they were already comfortable with. The study itself actually used sort of the idea of a radio play. So there you can see the little headphones. They had the opportunity to either watch little clips that were animated and had voiceover, or just listen to just the voice portion of it, depending on sort of what internet access felt like. They were able to get a lot of feedback about these young women's understanding of their sexual health, which then, of course, enables not-for-profits to create programming that is appropriate around. And this was a study that we were really, really proud of, the fact that our tech was able to sort of take us to this place and really support this kind of important research. Now I want to sort of layer on something slightly more commercial to this exercise and say, working with physicians. So another sort of easy challenge that we might have in research is, when we want to talk to physicians, we want to talk and be in the healthcare space and talk about complicated or sensitive health issues. We found that the participants in this piece of research that we did, that 65% of providers, so physicians themselves, thought the chat was more fun to complete than a traditional survey. 70% of patients said they were more willing to share personal information. And those are the stats that take us to, again, that kind of diversity, because we're not really sort of turning anyone off from this exercise. I'm going to let these two individuals speak for themselves. We'll start with the physician.
Okay, doing the survey was kind of fun. It seems I'm doing a text message with my friend in terms of communication, so it's not as boring, and I'm more inclined to continue doing it until I finish the survey rather than waiting for a few minutes if I have to stop and do something else.
So, I mean, how many times have you ever done a piece of research and then your respondents have said, hey, it was kind of fun? I mean, especially physicians. If the experience is kind of fun, then you're more likely to come back and do it again. I think we forget sometimes in research that we're competing in the same exact channels that where all of the entertainment that we can have lie. On this device, I could choose to do hundreds and hundreds of things. I could play a game, I could surf the news, I could look at my social media, I can chat with my mother, I can do a piece of research. And so it's really important that that research itself be engaging. And next we'll hear from this young woman.
I felt by the end of the survey, like I would have trusted giving information like, my age or my location, zip code, even down to my sexual orientation.
So again, we're hearing, here's a Gen Z herself. I love that she's out and about now doing her research while she's, I don't know where she's going, but she's going for a walk somewhere. That is the mobility and the portability that we get from being on our mobile devices, but really saying that, she feels like because of this channel that she can be, she's willing to share information that she wouldn't have otherwise perhaps felt comfortable sharing. This last example is one that unfortunately I can't show for the recorded portion of this webinar. I will certainly show it live, but it is a series of clips from Paramount that really does demonstrate the diversity of their community and the different kinds of people that they have, and also this real transparency that exists in the conversations that they have. I mean, there's the one section of the video talks about how people feel about Pride Month, and there's even a young trans woman that's sort of showing her scars, that's talking about why Pride Month is important to her and what it really meant to her. This ability to sort of lift these voices up into the kinds of research that we need to do to be really listening and having this really very sort of soul exposing kinds of video, I think, is another piece that adds to this diversity puzzle. Of course, another piece of diversity is accessibility, and being mindful of accessibility. We're very pleased to have recently become WCAG2 certified, making sure that no matter who you are, you can easily and safely access our chats and the information that is included in there. I will just give a little plug that the Insights Association does have this really great report, which is a best practices guide in doing mobile research and speaks to this point. Okay, so the second part that I really want to talk about is being mindful of what you ask and how you ask it. So we've assured ourselves that we're on the right kind of device, that we are using the right sort of tone, that a conversational approach is more appropriate. But how you ask questions and what you ask, I think, is something that we don't spend enough time thinking about. If I had a little soapbox under my desk, I would pull it out and stand on it in the middle of my room. When I really want to talk about sort of the notion of demo questions and where they belong in a study. We've really gotten into a habit in the research industry of starting our surveys off with demo questions. And I understand that we do it because we're concerned that we want our sample to look, a very, very specific way, or we're paying for a complete and we wouldn't want to get the answers to somebody that doesn't fit into the sort of narrow box that we've identified as who we want to have in our analysis package. But what we don't realize and what we don't consider is that doing this is turning people off. They're turning people off of the research approach. If we look at young people have been actively taught not to give their personal information to strangers on the internet. And we are ultimately strangers on the internet trying to get their personal information. And so when you start with a lot of sort of personal demographic types of questions, it turns them off right away. And thinking about sort of where that fits into your exercise and how can you actually build a little bit of trust and get some questions rolling before you launch into your demos. If you walk away from this session with not a single other thing, I want you to really ask yourself, do my demos have to be up front? Now, if you're a Bev Elk and you need to make sure that somebody is 21 to be able to answer questions, obviously you're going to start with that. But really outside of that, I really want you to seriously question whether demos need to go first. I think that when we are trying to also reach ethnically diverse groups of people in the research that I've done, there's also, that is very, very off-putting. This idea that you need to know all of this personal information, my questions about my gender, questions about my race. Why are you asking me these questions right off the bat? I don't even know where this research is going, and I therefore don't trust it, and I therefore am out. So no matter really what kind of diversity you're trying to build in your sample sets, really being really asking yourself whether or not you need to start with those questions is important. And it can even go one step further, which is, do you really need to ask those questions? Is that salient to the research that you're doing? I mean, if it's not salient to the research that you're doing, stop asking it as a knee-jerk reaction. One more time, another plug for Insights Association. There is a really good piece of information, or a really good document around how to ask demo questions on race and ethnicity in a more inclusive and sensitive way. I had the opportunity last year to see some of this work presented at a conference just like this. And I was really encouraged by it. It was specifically on the question of race and ethnicity. I really enjoyed how some studies were done, really trying to understand how to ask these questions in a way that makes the most sense and that feels inclusive and that isn't immediately off-putting. It's something that I took home and really put into practice in the kinds of questions that we ask. And I encourage you to go and have a look and see how those questions, so that you can use them in your own life. Again, I want to give you sort of outside example, an extreme example of how being sensitive about the kinds of questions you ask, the way you ask the questions, can really change what research you can do. I have had the pleasure of knowing this woman, Annika Gillis, pretty much my entire life. On National Women's Day, we were going around the table asking sort of what women inspire you, and for me, it's very much this woman. She works with Grand Council Treaty 3, which is a collection of bands, First Peoples bands in Northern Ontario, and is really working on a very large hospital building project, health transformation project in a very large part of Canada. And really getting into all of the different communities and getting community engagement and community involvement is really at the heart of what she does. And she has taken our tech and really started to use it in order to get feedback and get understanding in these very, very remote communities. You can see in the pictures, you know, she's doing it by using infographics, trying to think about what are the traditional ways of telling stories and gathering information that isn't sort of a classic survey. And the ability to sort of unpack those questions into this different approach has really worked for them. And they were initially very skeptical of this tech. And so they've had a very crawl, walk, run approach to it. I think we're kind of at the walk piece. And it's really facilitating open sharing on extremely sensitive, historically, culturally sensitive topics. She let me know a couple of weeks ago that they were actually investing in some iPads. They're in the process of teaching the younger people in these communities to actually be able to sit down with their elders, to actually take these surveys together, and really being able to bring lots of diverse voices to the table, which traditionally, I don't want to get too deep into politics here, but has traditionally been a challenge when dealing with the First Nations communities in Canada. Okay, so that's a very extreme example, of course, of how we use our tech. That doesn't help you if you're a brand here every day. So how can we actually take that kind of learning and use it in the sort of commercialized research that we're doing? I think that Dell does an extremely beautiful job of this. We have a community of people they've recruited who have come through and are dealing with sort of the service issues they're having on their laptops. They've brought them together into a community. And this is Lola, and Lola starts every single study that she does with a video. And I'm going to play it, and you can get a feeling for what she says.
Hey neighbors, today's chat is all about automation. We want to know your preference when it comes to maintenance. Would you rather set it and forget it, or actively manage your updates? I personally like to know things are being taken care of in the background. What's your preference?
I love the woman ironing in the background. This is a really great example of how in a very short little snippet, we can actually let people know what the research is for. And when you let people know what the research is for, they feel like they have more trust in doing that research. The last piece of this is going where people are. It's sort of the recruitment piece of it. So this multi-channel approach is ultimately what adds diversity to your research. If you're only recruiting in one channel, then you are getting all of the bias that is associated with that one channel. If you can actually recruit across in a bunch of different ways, you're actually now going to be able to reach a lot of different kinds of people. I think of recruitment as being sort of bucketed into three different big buckets. So your internal sources, these are the people that are already close to you. Intercepts, which could be, physical intercepts, app-enabled intercepts, web-enabled intercepts, and then external sources in situations where either you don't have enough diversity already in your own ecosystems, or maybe you just don't even have that access to your customers in the first place. Social media is an incredible way to activate the existing community of your fans and the people that are around you. These are people that are following you on social media. These are people that are already interested in what's going on with your brand. This is a great opportunity to recruit them. I'm going to show you a way that we recruit young men. Probably one of the most difficult, most elusive research people. I'm going to show you a great video that Surge, Seattle Surge, which is a esports company used on TikTok in order to recruit. So we'll let that play.
So you're telling me there's a chance I could win a free hoodie just by joining the Surge wave? Come on, man. You know I never lie to you. Check this out. So all you gotta do is open up the Surge TikTok, click the link in the bio, answer a few easy questions, give them some feedback, finish it up, and then bam. Look at those hoodies. Oh my God, I can't decide. That gray one is so nice, but what the hell are you doing in my garage? This isn't your house. We pulled up in this car. Am I still gonna get a hoodie? Click the link in bio. I gotta go. You mother.
This sort of untucked version of recruiting speaks the language. It's in the place where the kinds of people that Surge wants to talk to exist. And so that was a very successful recruit for them. Another way to deal with recruitment is to automate it within your CRM and your API. Make the recruit be a natural flow of the customer journey. And when you can actually be sort of bringing that all together, and the ask to join the community naturally happens on your own sites, it doesn't sort of come out of the blue. It's another way that we can find diversity. Here's a really great example where I think Revolt Media, which is P. Diddy's media company, does a mix of different kinds of recruitment. So you can see on the right-hand side, some stills of recruitment that happens during their Revolt Summit each year. This is a major source of recruitment for them. They've got some people intercepting. They're using the QR codes. They've built a really cool chill lounge where people can come in, they can answer the questions, get out of the heat. And that has been super effective for them. On the left here, I'm going to play a quick video that shows you in the stories.
Big deal, gonna have to.
So these are sort of these are on Diddy's own Instagram. These are within his story, this ability to recruit to Revolt Nation, which is the name of their community. And it just swipes right up. And the conversational survey, the recruitment chat begins, and an individual can just go ahead and join the community. The community itself feels and sounds consistent with how you would expect P. Diddy to, or members of the hip hop community to ask questions. It happens right in Instagram. You didn't have to leave Instagram and come back. And so this again has been a really effective source of recruitment. If we look at this as another way, so let's say you don't have your own, you need to be able to be recruiting externally. That can also be done with targeted social advertising. This is a recruit that we do for Paramount, for parents of young children, called Youth Navigators. We can get really at to very precise targeting. You can see that we're using a diversity in images. People tend to click on things that look like them. And so we really go out of our way to make sure that we are recruiting in a way that also looks diverse. It has the kind of diversity that we want to see in the community. This is a community that cares a lot about its ethnic diversity and its distribution. This has also been really successful for us in recruiting. And, finally, of course, finding the right partner, somebody that understands some of these pieces, that strategically understands the pros and cons of different channels that are based on your needs, the kind of distribution that you're looking for, that already understands how to do that kind of creative execution and run those sorts of campaigns, and understands how to measure them. And that is what I have. I think the great thing to do, if you followed me along to this point, is to grab this QR code. It'll give you a feeling for what our chats feel like. And thank you very much for your time today.